The county fairgrounds in Cedar Hollow were loud, sprawling, and smelled of hay, sweat, and fried dough. For someone like Emma Reynolds, just 9 years old and barely speaking above a whisper, it felt enormous. Too big, too bright, and far. Too full of strangers. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, silent and determined. The summer heat shimmered off the gravel paths and voices rang out from every direction. Carnival barkers, livestock handlers, kids chasing cotton candy. But Emma had only one reason for being there. One reason clutched tightly to her chest. A glass mason jar full of coins. Since last fall, Emma hadn't said a word. Not since 2 uniformed officers came to the farmhouse and told her that her mother, Officer Caroline Reynolds, had been killed in the line of duty. Just like that. Gone. The newspaper had called her a hero. The town called it a tragedy. But none of those words helped Emma sleep at night. The only one who seemed to understand her silence was a dog, her mom's old canine partner, Rex. After the funeral, Emma would sneak out after midnight and sit by the chain-link fence behind the police station where they kept Rex. She'd whisper to him through the bars, tell him she missed her mom, tell him about school, about the nightmares. Rex never barked. He just listened. That was enough. Now she stood in front of the auction pavilion, her jar of coins clutched like it held her soul. Emma's stepmom, Maria, hovered behind her, wringing her hands. "Sweetheart," Maria said gently, crouching beside her. "You don't have to do this, it won't be what you want." But Emma didn't answer. She just stared through the crowd, eyes fixed on the crate at the front of the pavilion. A handmade sign was taped to the side. Retired Canine Auction, Rex. There he was. Sitting tall, back straight, eyes sharp. Age showed at the edges of his muzzle, but Rex looked just as powerful as he had in every story Emma's mom used to tell. She felt the ache in her chest throb, a sharp, raw thing that wouldn't go away. People filled the benches, chattering with curiosity. Most were just there for the spectacle. A few remembered Officer Reynolds, but 2 men in the front row made Emma's stomach turn. The first was sleek, silver-haired, and dressed like he owned the world. William Granger, head of Granger Security Systems. His company's ads were plastered across every billboard for miles. His cold eyes scanned the crowd, calculating. The second man was a weathered rancher named Roy Mercer, a name Emma had only heard in passing. He kept mostly to himself out near the county line. But today, both men were here, and both were staring at Rex like he was a prize to be won. The auctioneer took the stage, cheerful and loud. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we offer you a piece of our town's proud history. Rex, 5 years of service with the late Officer Caroline Reynolds. Retired now, but still sharp, still strong. Let's find this hero a good home." Emma's heart pounded as the man raised his gavel. Opening bid, 500. A hand shot, up in the back. Another followed. Then Granger raised his finger, calm and smug. 1,000. Roy Mercer grunted, eyes still fixed on the dog. 1,500. The bids kept rising, $2,000, $3,000, each number louder, heavier. Emma's coins suddenly felt like nothing, just pennies in a storm. But she couldn't walk away. She stepped forward, jar in hand. Her legs shook. Her voice, unused for so long, felt like it might shatter in her throat. Still, she forced herself to speak. I want to bid," she said. The pavilion fell silent. The auctioneer leaned down. "What's your bid, sweetheart?" Emma lifted the jar, hands trembling. $52.16. Someone laughed. A sharp, mocking sound. But Rex barked once, loud and clear. A sound that echoed across the rafters. His eyes never left Emma, not for a second. The auctioneer's voice softened. "That's a brave offer, little lady, but I'm afraid it's not enough." Emma's chest crumpled. She turned to leave, but Rex whined, a low, heart-wrenching sound, and the crowd quieted again. It wasn't just about a dog. It was about a promise, a memory, the last living piece of her mom. She stayed rooted there, jar in hand, while the bidding resumed. Granger raised it to $4,000 without even blinking. Mercer countered at $4,500. Emma didn't hear the numbers anymore. She watched Rex, and Rex watched her. Maria touched her shoulder. "Emma, baby, we should go. This isn't fair." But Emma stood still. She remembered her mom's words from a night long ago. "If anything ever happens, promise me you'll look out for Rex. He's family." She never thought she'd have to keep that promise so soon. The bidding dragged on. $5,000. $6,000. Mercer's voice was gravel. Granger's was silk. The tension thickened with every number. At $7,000, Mercer hesitated. Granger smirked. But before the auctioneer could declare a winner, a woman stepped forward. The school librarian. "Ms. Carver." "That's enough," she cried. "That girl just lost her mother. That dog's not a product. He's part of her family." The room tensed. Granger sneered. "This is an auction, not a charity." But Mercer, he looked at Emma, then at Rex, then slowly said, "8,000. The auctioneer looked around, sweating now. 8,000 going once. Granger stood cool and arrogant. 10,000, he said. Gasps echoed across the room. Mercer slumped, defeated. The room buzzed. Emma stepped forward again. "Please," she whispered. "Please let me try." The auctioneer knelt. "What's your name?" "Emma Reynolds." "And your bid?" $52.16. The room froze. Even Granger looked stunned. The auctioneer hesitated, then shook his head gently. "I'm sorry, Emma. The rules, that's..." When it happened, Rex lunged forward with a growl that stopped hearts. The leash snapped tight. A loud clang echoed as the crate hit the wooden stage. A startled officer fumbled the latch. In one swift movement, Rex was free. He leapt down, trotting past Granger, past Mercer, past the auctioneer, straight to Emma. He stopped in front of her, pressed his forehead to her chest, and let out a deep, steady breath. The barn went still. Emma dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around his thick neck. He didn't move, didn't bark, just stayed with her. Unshakable. Maria cried. The crowd stared, some turning away out of respect. It felt like a sacred moment. A girl and a dog, all that was left of a broken family finding each other again. Mercer stepped forward. "Let the girl have the dog," Granger exploded. "This is a legal auction. That dog is department property." Mercer didn't flinch. "That dog is all she has left of her mother. This isn't about rules. It's about what's right." "Too," crowd murmured in agreement. Even the officers looked ashamed. Granger barked back. "Rules are rules. If you want to change the world, write to the governor." But then something shifted. One of the officers cleared his throat. "We all saw what happened. Maybe it's time we listen to what the dog wants." Granger laughed. "Dogs don't get to choose." Maria stood beside Emma. "She's lost everything. Don't take this from her." The auctioneer raised his hand. "Let's put it to a vote." The barn was silent. Dozens of hands hovered in hesitation, suspended in the thick air of what felt like history in the making. The auctioneer looked over the crowd, then said clearly, "All in favor of letting Rex stay with Emma Reynolds, raise your hand." It started with a few, then more. One by one, hands rose into the air. Townspeople, officers, parents, even a teenager with a skateboard propped under his seat. People who had come for a dog auction were now rising for something else entirely. For kindness, for decency, for a little girl and her dog. Even the officers who had stood by the crate earlier now lifted their hands. The only ones who didn't were William Granger and his stone-faced security man, arms folded tight across their chests. Roy Mercer stepped forward again, voice low but firm. "I withdraw my bid. That dog belongs with the girl." A wave of quiet applause rippled through the crowd. Granger's jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake," he snapped. "This isn't how the system works." The auctioneer set down his gavel gently on the wooden podium. "Maybe the system needs to remember what it's here for." Granger stormed out without another word, his security man trailing behind. Tension coiled in every step. Emma stayed kneeling in the sawdust, arms around Rex, his body warm and solid against hers. Maria knelt beside her, tears in her eyes but a smile on her lips. "You did it, baby," she whispered. "You really did it." Neil, Emma's stepdad, who had stood at the back of the barn most of the time like a man trying not to get in the way, now stepped forward. He looked at Emma with something deeper than pride, understanding, the kind that comes too late, but means even more for it. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," he said quietly. "Your mom would be too." The people slowly filed out of the barn, murmuring with disbelief and awe. Outside, the sun had disappeared behind clouds and the smell of oncoming rain hung in the air. But inside, something had changed. Emma wasn't the silent girl anymore. She was the girl who stood up for love and who was heard. They drove home with Rex in the back seat, his head resting between Emma and Maria. Neil drove in silence, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror again and again. Every time he looked, he saw something he didn't expect. Emma, smiling. Not a big grin, just a quiet one, but real. When they pulled into the driveway, Roy Mercer's old pickup rolled in behind them. He stepped out, rain beginning to mist his shoulders, and called out, "Keep him close. You just made some enemies." Maria nodded. "We know. Harding's not the type to lose quietly," he added, then climbed back into his truck and drove off, tail lights vanishing into the gray dusk. Inside the house, Rex roamed the rooms like he'd never left. He paused in front of Caroline's old armchair and laid his head on the worn fabric. A soft whine escaped his throat. Emma stood watching him, one hand on the doorframe, not saying anything. But she didn't have to. Rex understood. Neil stayed in the kitchen, a mug of untouched coffee cooling in his hands. Maria busied herself with towels and food neither of them ate. The house was quiet except for the soft thump of Rex's tail and the sound of Emma's footsteps as she followed him from room to room. Finally, he settled on the rug at Emma's feet. That's when the knock came. It was late. The rain was falling. "Steady now." Maria answered the door and found Roy Mercer standing there again, soaked and clutching a battered cardboard box. "I need to talk to all of you," he said. They gathered in the living room. Rex sat between Emma and Maria, upright and alert. Mercer placed the box on the table and opened it. Inside were old folders, yellowed newspaper clippings, and a small leather-bound notebook. "I think it's time you knew what Caroline was working on before she died," Mercer said. Maria's hand went to her mouth. "She told me something was wrong with the contracts the county had with a company called Terra Nova Biotech. Chemical spills, missing evidence. She was trying to build a case." "She never told me everything," Maria whispered. "She was trying to protect you," Mercer said. "She didn't know who she could trust." He pulled out the notebook and handed it to Emma. "It's all in here, dates, codes, names. She wrote it for you, I think, for when the time came." Emma opened it slowly. The handwriting was tight and clean, each page packed with scrawled thoughts, circles, underlines, and arrows. One page had a single line at the top. "Rex knows. Trust him." Neil leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "You're saying Granger's involved?" "I'm saying your wife found something worth killing over," Mercer replied. "And Granger's the only man in this town rich enough, powerful enough, and scared enough to try and erase it." Neil swallowed hard. "He was at the funeral, said all the right things." Mercer nodded. "He also made an offer to buy Rex from the department the day after she died. Told the chief it was for honor's sake. But I think he wanted to make sure that dog didn't end up with anyone who might know what Caroline knew." Maria looked pale. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to finish what she started," Mercer said. "But first, we're going to keep this notebook safe." Emma hugged it to her chest, eyes on Rex. The old dog met her gaze calmly. She didn't need to speak to know he understood. That night, thunder rolled overhead. The rain hammered the roof, but Emma sat on her bed with the notebook open and Rex curled at her side. She read each page by flashlight, tracing the notes with one finger. Words like shipment, evidence, and witness repeated again and again. Maria and Neil argued downstairs in quiet voices, but Emma didn't listen. She was somewhere else, deep in the words her mom had written, holding on to every line like a lifeline. At last, she whispered, "We'll finish it. Boy, I promise." Rex nuzzled her cheek and laid his head in her lap. His breath was steady, warm, his heart strong and sure. Outside, lightning split the sky. But inside, Emma finally felt ready. Not just to survive, but to speak, to fight, to be heard. Morning crept into Cedar Hollow beneath a blanket of rain clouds, the sky pale and restless. Emma woke early, Rex already alert beside her. His eyes followed her every movement as she got dressed, pulled on muddy sneakers, and slipped her mom's old notebook into her backpack. Downstairs, the kitchen was tense. Maria poured coffee with shaking hands. Neil stood stiffly by the window, eyes rimmed with red. He hadn't slept. Across the table, Roy Mercer unfolded a wrinkled county map and traced a line with a calloused finger. "There's movement at the old Terra Nova warehouse," he said. "Granger's men were there all night, loading trucks in the storm. Looks like they're trying to erase something." Neil frowned. "Like what?" "Records, chemicals, anything that ties them to what Caroline found." He pulled off his rain-soaked hat and ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I called in a favor with a friend on the county council. He says Granger's people are cleaning house, fast." Maria looked at Emma, fear tightening her face. "They know we have the notebook. They know Rex is with us." Mercer nodded. "Which means they might come for him." A heavy silence fell. Then Mercer said the words no one wanted to hear. "It's time you all knew everything." They gathered at the kitchen table. Rex laid at Emma's feet, tail thumping softly whenever her hand brushed his fur. The black notebook sat open beside Maria's coffee mug. Mercer pointed to a set of notes, scribbled times, names, and locations. Caroline was following a trail of fake invoices. The chemicals were being dumped on county land. She took Rex out to the sites. He could smell it, things no human would catch. She kept samples, vials. Emma's eyes widened. "She buried them," Mercer said. "Out by the pines behind the old barn. Told me she'd hide them there if anything happened." Without another word, Emma jumped up. Rex was already on his feet, nose twitching. The others followed, pulling on boots and jackets. Outside, the storm had eased to a fine drizzle. The grass squelched underfoot as they walked past the barn and into the trees. Emma followed Rex as he sniffed through the underbrush, moving with purpose. He stopped suddenly, paused, digging at the earth. Emma knelt beside him and dug too. Her hands hit metal, a rusted tin lunchbox. Mercer pried it open with his pocket knife. Inside were 3 small vials labeled with dates and numbers. The clear liquid inside looked harmless, but Rex backed away, nose wrinkling. "That's it," Mercer muttered. She said he could smell the difference. "These are the chemicals Terra Nova dumped. The real evidence." Maria stared down at the box. "Should we take it to the police?" Mercer shook his head. "Not yet. Granger's got friends in that station. We go public. Council meeting. Reporters. If we take this to the open, they can't. Bury it." Neil was pacing now, fists clenched. "And if they come for us first? Then we're ready." They returned to the house. Maria grabbed her camera. Neil found his old baseball bat. Mercer made quiet phone calls to trusted allies. Emma sat by Rex in the corner, the notebook on her lap. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. That afternoon, the rain finally broke. Sunlight spilled across the porch as they packed the evidence into Maria's tote bag. The vials wrapped in socks, Caroline's notebook, Mercer's clippings, and a flash drive Maria had just copied with digital scans of everything. Neil took the wheel. Maria sat up front. Mercer rode in his old truck behind them. Emma sat in the back seat, Rex pressed against her leg, his eyes never leaving the road. Halfway down Main Street, they passed the Terra Nova office. A dark SUV sat parked out front, engine idling. No one spoke, but everyone saw it. At the edge of the square, the Cedar Hollow Town Hall came into view, a plain building with white columns and dusty windows, now surrounded by cars and people. reporters, townsfolk, a few police officers, and 5 council members, already filing into the chambers. Emma squeezed Rex's fur. "Almost there, boy." He looked up at her with those deep, knowing eyes. Not fearful, not uncertain. "Ready." Inside the chamber, metal folding chairs filled, fast. Whispers spread like wildfire. People clutched copies of the local paper where rumors of a cover-up had already begun to stir. A reporter from Channel 7 News set up a camera near the back. Maria kept her bag tucked tight between her feet. Emma sat near the front, Rex's head resting on her lap. He was calm, watching, waiting. At the podium, Councilman Dean White gavelled the room to order. "We've been presented with new evidence concerning the disposition of retired K9 Rex and allegations tied to Terra Nova Biotech." His voice shook slightly. He turned to Maria. "Mrs. Reynolds, the floor is yours." Maria stood slowly. Her voice was tight but steady. "My wife, Officer Caroline Reynolds, died investigating Terra Nova. She believed the company was poisoning our land and paying officials to stay silent. She kept records, she collected samples, and she trained this dog, Rex, to find what others couldn't." She paused, voice breaking. "We ask 2 things. First, that Rex be allowed to stay, with my daughter Emma, as her therapy animal. Second, that this council open a formal investigation into Terra Nova and those connected to it." She stepped aside. Mercer took her place. His words were simple, harsh, and clear. "My daughter Molly died 2 years ago. She blew the whistle on Terra Nova. Then she vanished." The room gasped. "This dog," Mercer said, pointing to Rex, "isn't just a pet. He's living evidence. He's the one who found the chemicals, who was trained to track the very things Terra Nova tried to bury." Neil stood next. "I used to believe in rules, order, letting the system fix itself. But Caroline didn't die because the system worked. She died trying to expose a truth the system wouldn't touch." He held up a folder. "Emails, call logs, payment trails. This notebook. Everything points to one man trying to silence anyone who gets too close." He didn't say Granger's name. He didn't have to. The council members exchanged glances. Councilwoman Linda Myers, a longtime friend of Caroline's, leaned forward. "Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?" Emma's school therapist stood. Since her mother's death, Emma hasn't spoken to anyone. "Except this dog. Rex is her anchor. Taking him away would destroy the progress she's made." Then finally, William Granger rose. Smooth, practiced, and arrogant as ever. "I understand the emotion in this room," he began. "But let's not confuse grief with facts. Departmental policy is clear. Retired K9s are government property. Children can't adopt them. My firm offered a generous bid for Rex." He waved toward the front row. "And these so-called allegations? Wild theories. Baseless grief. Terra Nova is a pillar of this community." The room stiffened. Mercer stood again. "You call it grief. I call it truth. And you can't buy your way out of this one." White banged his gavel. "Enough." He looked at the notebook, the vials, the folders. "This council will take a recess to review the evidence." 30 minutes passed. The crowd whispered. The camera kept rolling. Emma sat still, her hand resting on Rex's head. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. The council returned. Councilman White took the mic again. "We've reached a decision." The room fell still. First, regarding Rex. Given the evidence presented, his training, and the recommendation of Emma's therapist, we approve the motion to certify Rex as a therapy dog under Emma Reynolds' care. Maria grabbed Emma's hand. Neil exhaled. Mercer's lips twitched into the hint of a smile. "Second," White continued, "the evidence presented will be turned over to state investigators. A formal inquiry into Terra Nova Biotech and its partners will begin immediately." Granger stood, face flushed. "You can't do this." "We just did," White said. "This meeting is adjourned." Applause erupted. Quiet, reverent, and full of something Emma hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. Outside the Cedar Hollow Council building, sunlight broke through the gray clouds for the first time in days. The square buzzed with movement. Reporters packing up cameras, townsfolk exchanging hushed congratulations, and a few quiet sobs of relief. But in the center of it all, Emma stood with Rex, hand resting on his thick fur, her face turned upward to the sky. She had no words yet, but she didn't need them. The truth had spoken for her. Neil walked beside her, one arm over Maria's shoulder. Mercer trailed behind, hat low over his eyes but a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Emma could feel something in the air, like the pressure had finally lifted, like something broken had begun to heal. "Come on," Maria said gently. "Let's go home." As they walked through the square, townspeople stopped to speak. "You're brave," someone whispered to Emma. Another woman placed a folded note into her hand. "Your mom would be proud." Rex accepted head scratches and kind words with his usual calm dignity, his eyes never far from Emma. It was as if the two of them were tethered now, not by a leash but by something deeper. A promise. A bond. The Subaru rattled down the winding road home. Maria drove. Neil sat in silence beside her, staring out at the hills. Emma rode in the back, one hand still buried in Rex's fur. She didn't want to let go. Not now. Not ever. When they pulled into the driveway, Mercer parked behind them in his old truck and stepped out. "I meant what I said," he told Maria quietly. "Keep him close. There are people who'll want that dog. Not for who he is, but for what he knows." Maria nodded solemnly. "We will, I promise." Inside, the house felt different. Not because it had changed, but because they had. Emma led Rex through each room. He sniffed every corner, paused at Caroline's old coat still hanging behind the door, and let out a low, satisfied sigh. He moved through the space like someone returning from war. Older, maybe even haunted, but home. In the kitchen, Maria made fresh coffee and peeled carrots into a pot she wasn't sure she'd finish. Neil stood by the window, arms folded, eyes unreadable. Emma stayed near Rex. Wherever he went, she followed. Later that evening, there was a knock at the door. When Maria opened it, Mercer stood there again, drenched from the knees down, a battered folder tucked under his arm. "I have something else," he said. "Something I should have handed over sooner." They all gathered in the living room again. Emma sat on the floor with Rex. Maria and Neil sat across from Mercer, watching as he opened the folder and spread out the contents on the table. Emails, phone records, payment logs, and photos, some old, some taken recently. "There's more than just corruption here," Mercer said. "Your wife didn't just stumble onto a case, she uncovered an entire network. Terra Nova's been buying silence for years, from councilmen, deputies, even judges." Neil's face paled as he flipped through the papers. This connects to half the town," Maria whispered. Caroline knew. That's why she kept Rex so close. He wasn't just her partner. He was her proof. Mercer leaned back. She trusted the dog more than anyone. Emma glanced down at Rex, who was now watching Mercer carefully, ears slightly perked, like he understood every word. "She trained him to find these chemicals," Mercer continued. "And I think he remembers where more are buried. There's a site out past Latham Creek, an old farmland the county seized a few years back. That's where she told me to go, if something ever happened to her." Neil rose, pacing. "So what now? We've turned over everything to the council." "We've started something," Mercer said. "But it's not over." Maria met his eyes. "You think Granger's going to let this go?" Mercer shook his head. "Not a chance. And I think it's time we stop playing defense." That night, the house was quiet again. Emma sat in bed with the notebook spread across her knees. She traced the pages slowly, committing every detail to memory. Rex lay beside her, head resting on her lap. Every few seconds, his ears flicked as if he was listening for danger Emma couldn't hear. Downstairs, Maria and Neil whispered in the kitchen, voices low but unified for the first time in months. Mercer had gone home, but not far. Emma flipped to the back of the notebook. There, in her mom's handwriting, were 6 words. "If you're reading this, trust Rex." Beneath it, a list of coordinates. Emma's finger hovered over the first one. She whispered, "We'll go, Mom. We'll find the truth." Rex's tail thumped softly against the quilt. She laid down beside him, arms curled around his neck, and fell asleep with her face pressed into his fur. In the morning, the skies had cleared. The storm was gone. But something else was brewing. The morning paper ran a headline in bold black letters. Council launches investigation into Terra Nova scandal. There was a photo, too, of Maria standing at the podium, of Emma with Rex by her side. As they ate breakfast in the quiet of the kitchen, Emma noticed something in Neil she hadn't seen before. Not guilt, not distance, but resolve. "I've got something I've been holding on to," he said finally, getting up and disappearing into the den. When he returned, he was holding a faded manila envelope. "I found this when I cleaned out Caroline's desk after the funeral," he explained, placing it on the table. "Didn't know what it meant at the time. Thought it was just clutter." Maria opened it carefully. Inside were printouts, call logs, anonymous tip forms, a hand-drawn map of the woods near Latham Creek, and one note in Caroline's handwriting. "Do not trust Granger. Follow the trail." Neil cleared his throat. "I should have said something sooner. I wasn't ready." Emma reached across the table and took his hand. He looked down in surprise. She didn't say anything, but her eyes told him everything. He nodded, tears welling in the corners of his eyes. "I'll do better," he said. "I'll help however I can." Maria leaned against him. "We're in this together." That afternoon, they packed the car again. Maria's tote held the samples and notebook. Neil brought the map. Emma wore her mom's old jacket, sleeves still too long, and Rex jumped into the back seat like he already knew the mission. They weren't headed to the police. They weren't going to the council. They were headed to the coordinates in the notebook, to the truth. The road was long and empty. Pines leaned over the gravel like old watchers, keeping secrets. As they pulled off onto a dirt path, Rex grew tense. His nose twitched. His ears stood alert. They stopped near a rusted gate, long forgotten. A faded sign read, "County property. No trespassing." Neil cut the engine. They stepped out. Rex bolted forward, nose to the ground, following a path only he could smell. They followed in silence, boots crunching dead leaves. 30 yards in, Rex stopped, barked once, and began to dig. The forest around Latham Creek was silent, too silent. No wind, no birdsong. Just the soft scrape of Emma's boots through wet leaves and the rhythmic thud of Rex's paws ahead of her. His body was taut with purpose, nose low, tail steady, like a compass needle. Maria, Neil, and Emma trailed behind, weaving through pine needles and overgrown brush, following the dog that had once been just a partner. And now, a guide. When Rex stopped, it was sudden. His paw lifted mid-step, his nose pressed into the dirt. Then he started digging. Emma dropped to her knees beside him, fingers clawing at the damp soil. She didn't care about the cold or the mud caking her fingernails. She dug like something was buried there that could save the world. After a few frantic minutes, her hand struck metal. A second rusted box, identical to the one they'd found. Near the barn, Maria knelt next to them. "Careful, baby." Neil hovered behind, his body shielding them from the woods like he expected something to leap out of the trees. With a pop, the lid gave way. Inside, 4 more vials. Murky liquid sealed in glass, labeled in Caroline's handwriting. Codes, dates, GPS markers. A flash drive in a waterproof case. A folded document with Terra Nova's name across the top, and a photograph. It was grainy, dark, but clear enough. Granger, standing in front of what looked like a row of barrels, hands in his pockets, smirking. Behind him, a truck with a government plate. Maria gasped. This is it." Neil knelt beside her. This is everything. Emma picked up the photo with both hands. The edges trembled. She could feel her mom's fingerprints in every detail, every fold, every underline, every warning. She didn't just investigate them, Maria whispered. She documented everything. Emma stared at the image for a long moment, then looked at Rex. "You brought us here," she said softly. Rex pressed his nose to her hand and let out a low, steady breath. It was the closest thing to a yes he'd ever spoken. They rushed home before sundown, back through winding roads and fields now colored in amber light. Maria called Mercer. Neil called the county reporter again. By the time they reached their house, the driveway already had 2 cars waiting. The journalist and a trusted lawyer Mercer had arranged. Inside, the kitchen table transformed into a war room. They spread out the evidence: vials, photographs, documents. Maria handed over the notebook and flash drive. The reporter's eyes widened as she read. "This is enough for front-page news," she said. "Maybe even national coverage." The lawyer nodded slowly. "You need to be prepared. This will hit hard. Granger won't go down quietly." Neil glanced toward the window. "He's already tried scaring us off. He showed up at our door once. I don't think he's done." Maria looked at Emma. "We'll protect her. We protect each other." Emma was silent until she wasn't. "I want to speak," she said. Everyone froze. Maria's eyes filled instantly. Neil leaned in. "What, sweetheart?" Emma swallowed. "When you publish it. The story. I want to say something. For Mom." The reporter's voice was gentle. "Of course. Whatever you want." Emma reached for the notebook. She turned to the last page, blank until now. She uncapped a pen and began to write. That night, the article went live. Exposed. Local hero's investigation into biotech corruption reveals environmental crimes and political bribery. Beneath it, a subheading in smaller text, byline Rachel Foster, with personal words from Caroline Reynolds' daughter, Emma. Emma's words weren't long, but they didn't need to be. "My mom always said truth matters, even if it hurts. She trained Rex to protect people. She gave her life trying to stop bad people from hurting others. She left behind more than a case. She left a path. I'm going to walk it. Emma Reynolds." The story exploded across social media. Local TV ran it within hours. By morning, the mayor had called a special session. By noon, the state attorney's office had arrived in Cedar Hollow. Granger was unreachable. His security firm issued a vague statement denying all wrongdoing. But it didn't matter. The evidence was too strong, too public, too undeniable. For a week, the Reynolds house became a hub of visitors, reporters, officers, lawyers, and neighbors. Some came to say thank you. Others brought flowers. A few just stood on the porch and cried. Mercer moved into the guest room temporarily, not for safety, he claimed, but because someone's got to fix that leaky sink anyway. Rex never left Emma's side. One afternoon, they returned from a long walk in the woods to find an envelope on the porch. No postage, just her name on the front. Emma. Inside, a Polaroid. It showed a wooded trail, a familiar one. On the back, there's more. Northwest Ridge, old mine entrance. No signature, no handwriting they recognized. But Rex growled the moment Maria showed it to him. He recognized the smell. The next morning, before dawn, they hiked the ridge. This time Mercer brought his old hunting rifle. Neil carried a flashlight and a flare. Maria held her camera and the photo. Emma led the way. Rex at her side. At the top they found it, a boarded-up tunnel mouth, hidden behind brush. "Looks like no one's been here in years," Neil said. But Rex was already pacing, nose twitching. He started digging again, this time at the base of a tree near the entrance. Minutes later, Emma uncovered another box, smaller, but inside, a burned hard drive and a USB key. The USB worked. Inside, a video file. Emma watched it that night in the living room. Knees pulled to her chest, the family gathered around her. It was footage from a hidden camera, Caroline's voice. "If something happens to me, don't stop. You follow it to the end. You listen to Rex. He'll show you what matters. I love you, baby girl." Then, Granger's voice, talking on a burner phone, names, payouts, threats. It was the missing piece. By the end of the week, Granger was arrested, not by local police, but by the state. Fraud, bribery, environmental violations, even conspiracy. More arrests followed. 2 councilmen, a deputy, and a former judge. The town of Cedar Hollow reeled. But it didn't break, because at the center of the storm was a girl who had once lost her voice and found something stronger. A cause. A family. A dog. Weeks later, Emma stood outside the same auction barn where it had all started. But this time, it wasn't for bidding, it was for recognition. A small ceremony. The mayor stepped up to the podium. "We honor today not only the service of Officer Caroline Reynolds, but the bravery of her daughter Emma, her partner Rex, and the citizens who stood beside them. This town is better because of you." A plaque was unveiled. It read, "In memory of Officer Caroline Reynolds, for truth, courage, and service, and to Rex, protector, partner, and hero." The crowd clapped. But Emma didn't hear it. She was too focused on the figure beside her. Rex, ears perked, standing proud. She bent down and whispered, "We did it." Rex licked her cheek, and for the first time in nearly a year, Emma laughed. Not a quiet one, a real, wide, glowing laugh. The sound echoed through the rafters. A voice returned, a life rebuilt, a bond that nothing, not grief, not corruption, not even silence, could ever break. A month after the town hall ceremony, Cedar Hollow was quieter, not because people forgot, but because something had shifted. The storm had passed. Truth had taken root, and healing had begun. Emma sat on the back porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her notebook open in her lap. The same black notebook her mom had once filled with facts, dates, warnings, now filled with Emma's own handwriting. Memories, plans, promises. Rex lay beside her, dozing peacefully. His ears still twitched at every breeze, but for once he was at rest, completely, deeply, finally. Maria stepped outside with 2 mugs of cocoa, handing one to Emma. "You writing?" Emma nodded. "Just remembering." Maria smiled softly. "You know, your mom used to say words are how we keep the truth alive even after we're gone." Emma looked up. "I want to write about all of it, not just what happened, but what it meant. For Mom, for Rex, for me." Maria knelt beside her. "Then do it, baby. Write the story, the real one." Inside, Neil had converted the guest room into a small office. He helped Emma scan every page of the notebook. Maria reached out to a publisher a friend had connected her to. The reporter from the council meeting helped Emma shape the story. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. But word spread, and then the emails started coming in. From other families, other towns, other kids, from people who had lost someone in the line of duty or who'd been silenced, or who had a dog that once saved their lives. One message from a woman in Tennessee read, "Your story gave me courage to speak out about my husband's case. Thank you, Emma." Another came from a young girl in Arizona. "I'm scared to talk since my dad died, but your dog looks like mine, and I think I'll try now. Maybe I'll write like you do." Emma read every message. Some made her cry. Some made her laugh. All of them made her feel less alone. And every time she sat down to write more of her story, Rex would curl up at her feet, calm and quiet, like he knew his job still wasn't done. One chilly Saturday morning, Emma and Maria took a drive out to the old station where Rex had once been kept behind chain-link fencing. It had been abandoned for years, now locked and forgotten. Weeds pushing through the cracks, the training, fields overgrown. but not for long. With some money from the state grant and a few volunteers from town, the station would be transformed into something new: the Reynolds Center for Canine Rehabilitation and Youth Healing, a place where retired service dogs could find peace, where kids who'd experienced loss or trauma could visit, work with the dogs, and learn to trust again. Emma stood at the fence, hand curled around the links, imagining what it would look like. Kids running through the grass, dogs like Rex roaming free. A little girl, maybe scared, maybe quiet, reaching out and finding warmth in the soft fur of a loyal friend. Maria wrapped an arm around her shoulder. "You ready to change even more lives?" Emma smiled. "We already are." By spring, the book was finished, titled simply, "What Rex Knew." The cover showed a drawing of a girl and a German shepherd, standing beneath pine trees with the sun breaking through the clouds. The publisher printed 5,000 copies. It sold out in 3 days. Local schools added it to their libraries. Bookstores displayed it in windows. The state honored Emma with a Youth Bravery Award, but Emma didn't care about the press or the headlines. She cared about one thing: that her mom's story had been told, and that Rex's name would never be forgotten. One summer evening, after the sun dipped low and fireflies began blinking across the yard, Emma sat on the grass beside Rex, stroking his back. He was older now. The silver on his muzzle had deepened. His steps were slower, his naps longer. But his eyes, those steady, soulful eyes, still watched her like she was the only thing in the world. "You know you changed everything, right?" she whispered. "Not just for me, for this whole town." Rex huffed softly. Emma laughed. "You don't think it was a big deal?" He rolled onto his side and pressed his head into her lap. Maria called from the porch, "Come on in when you're ready." Emma looked down at Rex. "Let's stay out here a little longer," she said. And so they did. The sky went from gold to indigo. The stars came out. The wind picked up. But the girl and the dog stayed close, like they always had, like they always would. Years passed. Emma grew taller, older, wiser. She started giving talks at schools. She launched a scholarship in her mom's name. She helped other kids write their stories, speak their truths, and build courage from silence. The center thrived. Dozens of dogs were rescued, retrained, and rehomed. Hundreds of kids found peace in the warmth of wagging tails and soft ears. And everywhere in every room hung a photo of Officer Caroline Reynolds and her partner, Rex. And right beside them, in a frame of worn wood, a photo of Emma, 9 years old, arms wrapped around the dog who saved her life. One winter morning, Emma woke before sunrise. The house was quiet. She found Rex lying near the back door, watching the sky turn silver. She sat beside him and stroked his fur. He rested his head on her knee, and he closed his eyes. When the vet arrived later, there were no words, but there were tears. And there was love. Because Rex hadn't just been a dog, he'd been a lifeline, a guardian, a bridge between what was broken and what could be whole again. The next day, the town gathered at the center's memorial garden. A new stone was placed in the grass. Rex, loyal partner, beloved hero. You led us when we were lost. You listened when we were silent. You stayed, even when others left. You were and always will be family. Emma placed her hand on the stone. She didn't cry. Not this time. Because Rex had left her stronger. And she would carry his memory wherever she went, in every story she told, in every life she touched, in every moment she chose courage over fear. And when she looked to the trees where the light broke through just like it did the day she found the truth, she smiled, because she knew Rex would always be with her.